Is Peter going to be joining us, Matt?
Peter should be joining us.
Okay.
Last meeting, I think he joined at the last minute.
Yeah,
I'm assuming
okay.
he'll be with us in just a second here.
Okay, all right.
I think he is still in the Adirondacks, actually. So
Okay.
not that that's material, but
Okay. All right, good evening. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Wolfeboro Planning Board. Welcome to the June 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Wolfeboro Planning Board. As chair of the Planning Board, due to the COVID-19 crisis in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order number 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the GoToMeeting platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the GoToMeeting platform. The public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 1-646-749-3122, followed by the audio access code 918-242-429, or by video following the directions on the Town of Wolfeboro website posted on the homepage under the virtual town meeting login information page. B, providing public access of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using GoToMeeting, and instructions are provided on the Town of Wolfeboro website at wolfeboro.nh.us on the virtual town meeting login information page. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or computer, please immediately call 603-391-8489. That's Matt Sullivan's cell number, or email planningdirector@wolfeboro.nh.us. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event that the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. E, meeting votes. Members of the board will be unmuted for the entirety of the meeting. Members of the public will be muted for the meeting with the exception of public comment portions of public hearings. I'd like to start the meeting with a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, and that is required under the right to know law. Von Dugan?
Here, no one else is here.
Mike Cotter?
Present, and no one else in the room with me.
Peter Goodwin?
Present, and my wife is in the room.
Okay. Susan Replier? Susan, you need to unmute. There
Sorry.
you go.
Present, and no one else is here.
Okay, thank you. Brad Harriman?
Present, and you might hear a dog snoring in the background.
All right, thank you. And Kathy Barnard, I'm present. I need to recuse myself for the first item on the agenda, and I'm going to turn this over to Mike Cotter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everybody hear me? Oh, I guess you can. We received just a few hours before the meeting a request to continue this meeting to a date certain, July 7, 2020. So before we go any further, I would like to entertain a motion to accept the request for continuance.
And just a reminder for the board, that meeting will be July 7th at 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
because of
Beg
the
pardon.
No, that's fine, Mike. And I just want to remind the board that I would sort of just remind the public that in the event that the circumstances have changed and the board is able to meet in person, the meeting will be at the Wolfeboro Town Hall. However, if that's not the case, then the meeting would take place virtually only via the same login information presented for this evening's meeting.
All right, then I'm looking for a motion to continue this meeting to July 7 p.m. either via Zoom or in person at the Wolfeboro Town Hall.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Seconded by Vaughn. All in favor, roll call vote, please, if I may. Vaughn Dugan,
Aye.
Peter Goodwin,
Aye.
Brad Harriman,
Aye.
Mike Cotter votes aye. Susan Replier.
Aye.
Okay, the vote is taken and passed. The hearing will be continued to July 7, 2020 at 7 p.m. either via Zoom, details to be announced subsequently, or at the Wolfeboro Town Hall. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can hand the meeting over to you again.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is another continued item. This item was continued from May 5th, 2020, Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum at 61 Railroad Road Avenue, tax map and lot 217-46, case 2020-15. This is a site plan review for a museum use on town-owned property. I'll turn this over to the applicant.
Madam Chairman, if I may, before the applicant gets started.
Okay.
I have a number of problems with this application, which I'd like to raise to the board before we get started. They would affect, if the board agrees with me, the procedure to be followed tonight. In the first place, the applicant is listed on our application as the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum. The owner is given as the town of Wolfeboro, but this application concerns a piece of public property in the town itself. The proper applicant should be the town of Wolfeboro. The agency could well be the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum or Scott Lawler, but the actual applicant should be the town, not an individual or not an entity, the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum, which has no actual interest in this property. It neither leases it nor owns it. Yet the application, once it's gone through and assuming it is approved or even disapproved, will encumber that piece of town property. Yet the Board of Selectmen are not involved actively as agents in this operation. And the individual making the application has no interest in the property whatsoever. Ordinarily, the town does not need to come to the planning board for site plan review. The town is exempt from its own regulations. So this is again another irregularity. I don't understand why the town, through the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum, is applying to the planning board for site plan review when it has no legal obligation to do that. It has not advised the planning board that it intends to do this in this process. It is not agreed that it is to be bound by decision of the planning board. I think consequently, the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum has no standing before the planning board. And despite the letter appointing an agent by the Board of Selectmen, this application should proceed no further.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Matt, do you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to comment on, the board will remember that when this application was initially continued to the June meeting date, the question of authorization was the very core of that continuance motion. It is very common in site plan review and other land use applications, including even building applications, for the owner that is signing or authorizing either work or an application to be submitted, for them to submit some other separate document that affirms the ability of another party to file that application. In this case, I feel that, and Mike and I have had some good discourse about this, but I feel that the owner of the property is in fact the town of Wolfeboro. The town of Wolfeboro authorized the submission of this application to the planning board via their vote on May 6, 2020, which is presented in your packet. The applicant is in fact the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum. And to comment quickly on Mike's comment about subjectivity to, or being subjected to the planning board review process, RSA 674-54 exempts governmental uses. It does not necessarily exempt other uses on government property from planning board review. Therefore, I think the application is subject to the planning board's review this evening. I would only close by saying I recognize Mike's concerns, but I think if this is a concern that the board validates this evening, then we potentially have a more systemic issue with the way that authorization is provided for applications, because quite frankly, this is the process that is used by not only Wolfeboro, but by towns across the state to authorize application submission.
Madam Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I respect the planner's opinion. I don't agree with it. He knows I don't agree with it. I think the proper applicant in this case should be the owner of the property. It is typical for us to hear from the owner of the property. And if where an agent is appointed, we will hear from the agent, but the owner of the property is always standing behind the agent. In this case, the applicant is listed as the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum. Not to burden the board further, I feel this is a very irregular application. I will have to abstain if the board decides to continue further with it. I would urge the board to obtain legal counsel on this issue to see whether or not the board can proceed properly with this application, or does it need to be restructured in some fashion? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Planning board members, comments, your thoughts?
I guess I have the problem that I listened to Mike's issues and his comments, and I listened to Matt's comments, and I believe that Matt has read the laws, the regulations very well, and so therefore I, in many ways, would support him. But then again, Mike ends up having a very firm stand on what he's saying.
Okay, Matt, do you know if the selectman's attorney or the town's attorney has weighed in on this?
So,
don't believe-
Madam Chair, well, Madam Chair, I do want to offer some thoughts on that. So, and I do know that Jim Pinio is with us this evening. We expected this issue to be raised.
Okay.
Jim Pinio and I had a brief conference call with town council last month when these applications were coming to both the ZBA and the planning board. The context of that conversation was that there was concern expressed that without a lease document specifically, the applications could not be authorized before the planning board or the zoning board. We conferred with council, and in fact, it was the planning board's council that we conferred with. And Attorney Spector Morgan opined that a lease was not necessary, but that the selectmen did need to provide some form of authorization. Whether that authorization was of another individual, such as the town manager, to sign the application, or if that authorization was in the form of a letter specifically doing so. That was the basis of the decision of the selectmen on May 6, 2020. I don't want to put Mr. Harriman on the spot, but he was a part of that vote. My understanding of that vote being present, at least in the virtual meeting, was that it was to do just that, to authorize the submission of these two applications as the owner of the property. I am very sympathetic to Mike's concerns. Again, we've had some good conversation about this, but I believe that the letter is adequate. Although I would say if the board is completely uncomfortable moving forward, I'm happy to get a legal opinion, but I do feel the issue has been vetted.
Okay, well, I happened to watch that Board of Selectmen meeting, and I have the same recollection that you do, Matt. But Brad, did you want to comment or not? We don't want to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. Yeah, off this comment here on the meeting was May 11th, that Wednesday night, and as that letter shows there, I'm actually not on as a signature on that letter because I could not attend that meeting that night.
Okay.
So I was not present. I knew it was on the agenda and everything there. I do concur with what that letter says and what Matt has said, that, you know, that letter does authorize the submission for both applications to the ZBA and the planning board for the Lakes Region Model Railroad to pursue that. And I'm comfortable with, me personally speaking, as a member of the planning board this evening, I'm comfortable with moving forward with this, with that letter authorizing them to proceed with this application.
Okay, all right, thank you. If there's no other planning board member who is uncomfortable moving ahead, I think we should go ahead and hear the application and then discuss it. Is anyone else uncomfortable and share Mike's feelings?
Should there be a motion to that effect?
Matt, would that be the best thing to do?
I believe the issue of authorization is undertaken when you make a motion of completeness. I think it would be best to identify the issue now if you believe it to be one, but ultimately the board, when it makes its motion on completeness, could identify that as the reason for feeling that the application is incomplete.
Okay.
I think it would be irregular to have a motion to say that the authorization is valid. I think that would be an odd move from the board.
Agreed.
Okay. Then I think we should proceed then. And let's hear from the applicant or the applicant's agent, whoever's going to speak to this. Randy, are you on?
Hi, Kathy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Nice to see you guys. I hope you're all well.
Uh-huh.
Randy Tatro, Norway Plains, for the applicant / owner, I guess, in this case. I hear what Mike's saying, and, you know, I understand the difference in how we normally do it. And Matt's right. Normally we put the owner of record down, and if it's somebody that's buying property or dealing with it, we put them down as the applicant, and we get the appropriate agents for owner. So however you guys want to handle that. We are the surveyor of record and civil engineer for the minor engineering that's done on the site. I'll paraphrase quickly the narrative that you guys received in your packet. You also received a packet from John Sims, who's with us tonight, regarding the use of the property. I listened in a little bit ZBA last night. They ran out of time. They didn't hear the special exception use variant use meeting. So I talked with Matt today, and he felt that it was okay to continue with this planning board application. So on behalf of the Lakes Region Model Railroad that's located on 61 Railroad Avenue, the project is basically to redo the 1872 freight shed into a model railroad museum through a three-phase process, again outlined in the narrative we attached. It's a small piece of property that's owned by the town of Wolfeboro. It's adjacent to the conservation easement and Bean property, Bean Park. It's located in the CI zone in the Central Business District. The parcel is currently, developed with the old crate thing. It was Wolfeboro Oil. There's a gravel parking lot and a gravel roadway, which is Railroad Avenue. Everybody pretty much knows what that's like. And there's a portion of the narrows of Back Bay, paved access and parking areas on the parcel as well. As such, the lot is about 83% impervious covered. The existing building is unheated and sits up off the ground on piers. Again, people have gone by it on Bridge Falls Path. Access to the building is via wooden steps on the south end, as shown on the plan. And again, Matt has all the plans and I have them too, just in case my skills at this new way of doing it aren't that good.
Randy, I'm gonna go ahead and share the plans with everybody so they can see them. So if there are any questions, they'll be up on the screen. Okay.
So the first plan that Matt's showing is the existing features plan. We were hired to do an existing as-built survey of that general area that included not only the boundaries, but any site features and utility locations and so forth, so that we would meet all the site review regulations in that respect. The applicant is proposing to remove the small steps in the front and construct a new ramp and steps that would be ADA compliant. So our part in this mission was to first get all the as-built information, incorporate the interior plan and exterior ADA ramp plan prepared by Bergeron Technical, and also try to stay as close as we can in conjunction with the Underwood engineering plans of the potential development, the potential improvements to this area by the town. So there is a long deck on the easterly side of the building facing the path, which will be removed and reconstructed. After the removal and prior to the reconstruction, the earth below the building and deck will be regraded with clean stone to create a positive pitch toward the existing catch basin. Currently, the water puddles up underneath there, has for years, and there's a catch basin located near the existing entrance. So the plan is to provide a drip edge that is shown on the detail plan. It's basically a pipe and drip edge stone to try to collect all the water that's now puddling under the building, get it into the original catch basin, and get it into a municipal drainage system. We're also proposing existing on-site parking that's located the east side of the building, as shown on the site plan. We've originally we sized it for the building size, which would, per the square footage, would require 10 spaces. Then there was reconsideration that the actual requirement was the area that was to be used by the public inside the building. So that was reduced to the 500 square feet that's shown on the Bergeron interior plan that was provided to you guys in your packet, I believe. That area would figure into about 3 parking spaces. And then there was more discussion about that after this was submitted, that potentially the entryway and hallway and bathroom way is also public access. So that would bump it up to around 1,200 square feet, which would be more like 6 spaces provided. So either way, the only time that it wouldn't meet the on-site parking regulations, and hopefully I ain't talking too loud here, the on-site parking regulations, we also provided an off-street parking plan that's in your packet. It's the colored one that shows the amount of parking spaces within a 500 walking distance space, which I think added up to like 80, 84 spaces. Again, our part in this was to try to prepare a existing features plan and a proposed development plan under the direction of the applicant and historical discussion with the town. So at this point, I've kind of explained almost everything that we've dealt with. The plans are pretty basic as compared to some of the site plans we deal with. But again, John Sims is in attendance, and he is the gentleman that's taking us through the process and knows the history the best. If there's any questions about the proposed use of this property and such things, he'd be the one to answer them. There was a concern raised recently by Public Works and by an abutting landowner about public access and safety and so forth. So I will be available to speak to that, even though in this case, I think Mr. Sims and Mr. Sullivan have discussed that at length and would be able to answer any planning board's questions. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I do have a concern that I mentioned to Matt earlier, that generally it seems when a project needs a variance or a special exception from the zoning board, generally that's obtained first. And so I have some questions about whether we really could legitimately hear this. Because we're dealing with a use that has not yet been approved, and that's the job of the ZBA. Do you want to comment on that, Randy?
Sure.
I mean,
I was under similar impression that.
Wait a minute. You've done a lot of applications before this board, and I mean, does this seem like an unusual order? To you to go the site plan first and then the special exception? That's my question.
Okay. Sure, Madam Chair. You put me on the spot a little bit, but yeah, I mean, normally the use or the special exception or the use variance or any other variances required are normally taken up before the site review application. I hope I'm not making all that noise, but but I did have a conversation with Matt, asked a similar question that you did, Kathy. And again, he can speak for himself, but he informed me that no, it is proper to be able to have the planning board discuss that and not necessarily make a final approval or anything, but they'd be able to discuss the merits of the case without having first the ZBA.
Okay, well, it was my understanding that the ZBA is going to be dealing with this issue on, let's see, Thursday night, Matt, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, did you want to comment on this issue?
I would like to comment on the issue. It's clear that within guidance for planning boards in the state of New Hampshire that although it is preferential for any proposed application going to the planning board to be granted the necessary relief by the zoning board, whether it be through a variance or special exception, it is not a requirement that the process take place in that manner. And I'm just going to briefly quote the handbook, and I'll be brief with this. This is the planning board handbook dated November 2019. A planning board may not grant final approval to a project that violates the zoning ordinance. And the key word there is final. Either the planning board or the zoning board
You're frozen.
or could grant functionally that conditional approval will be conditional upon the other boards approving of said use. However, applicant obtain the necessary approval from the ZBA prior to seeking planning board approval. So again, the best practice is certainly to go to the zoning board first, but it is not a requirement to do so.
Okay. I mean, generally.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Well,
Hear you, yes.
you were in and out a little. But the ZBA many times adds conditions that they want the planning board to consider. So, I mean, I guess my thought is to maybe move ahead. It sounds as if we can, but then continue until we know what those conditions are, possibly, if they approve it.
Yeah, and I would just say, and I know Mike wants to ask them, but just that you're right, Kathy. It just that the applicant accepts additional risk by going in this direction, I believe. but there's no prohibition. But I agree with you that it does create complications when it comes to any specific restrictions that might be placed on the use. Yes.
Okay, Mike, did you, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just piling irregularity onto irregularity, and it's jeopardizing the entire application and the entire process. We do not ordinarily hear an application for site plan review if it's pending before the ZBA and we have no resolution of the ZBA decision. I think it would be personally, I think it would be unwise to hear this application tonight contingent upon conditions imposed by a ZBA decision on Thursday. This application, this project, I should say, has been in the process for a long time. I don't see any reason why it cannot continue for a few more days. I would strongly urge the board to continue this application until after the ZBA has held its hearing on Thursday. Get in hand the conditions that ZBA imposes, if any, and then hear the application with those conditions in mind as well, if that's the board's pleasure.
Yeah, okay, well, then there's an additional issue that was brought to our attention by the Bean family. They have concerns about some encroachment, and it's my understanding that there is to be a site meeting with all of the parties involved. But I'm uncomfortable knowing that they have concerns. It sounds to me as if their concerns haven't been addressed yet. And so that's another issue that seems to be an open item to me.
Well, to me, it ends up seeming that that there's an issue with who is the person who is applying, whether it is the town or whether it is the railroad group. We end up having the ZBA issue, and now you've suggested there's a Bean issue, and I can't imagine that we really can really make a decision on this. So I would think that continuing the hearing is the way to go.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm sensitive to these comments, and I'm not going to speak against them. I would only add that if the board is going to continue the discussion, I would strongly recommend that you open the public hearing. Unless you feel that the application is not complete, and I don't believe that there is a completeness issue here. So I would recommend making a motion to accept the application as complete, accepting jurisdiction, open the public hearing, recognizing that you will continue it. But in the interest of not delaying this yet another time after public comments are received at the next hearing, it may be useful to get some of those on the record at this point, so that when the applicant is making modifications, they can also make modifications based on that public testimony.
Okay, well, that was the next question I was going to ask the planning board members, if we could go ahead and open the public hearing, but go ahead, Mike.
How can we possibly proceed with an application as complete and then open a public hearing when it does not have the legal right to violate zoning in the first place? We're talking about an application for a use which currently is illegal. We can't do that. We have to wait until ZBA grants relief from the zoning ordinance before we can go ahead and look at the use. Otherwise, it's an irregular process if we do it any other way. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, is there a way legally, I guess, that we can hear from the public without accepting the application as complete? There is not.
Well, I don't mean to be argumentative, but okay. Mike is saying you can't, but it's a matter of not wanting to, quite frankly, because you are allowed under law to move forward with an application and even issue a conditional approval in lieu of a zoning violation. And I recognize the board may not want to do that, and that's fine. But the idea that you cannot legally, it's just not the case. I agree with, I really do agree with all the comments, but if you're going to make the decision not to proceed and open the public hearing, it's a matter of whether you want to or not, whether the statute prohibits it.
I never said it was illegal to do so. I said it was
Okay.
irregular to do so. It just feels wrong.
Understood, Mike, sorry.
Would it be possible to end up opening a period of public comment instead of having it part of the quote public hearing on this particular issue?
No, he's saying not. Basically, it seems that we need to accept the application as complete in order to open the public hearing. And that's the situation we're in. And I really would like to hear if there are other issues that need to be addressed. I'd like to hear them now rather than later, I guess. So
Well, what I was suggesting was that there is a period of time of our meetings when there is public comment. And could that be done? And Matt is shaking his head.
Okay, well,
I'm going to jump in Mike's camp now. I think that would be highly irregular. And I would encourage the board to not do that, because I think while that's an effective way of dealing with the situation, it's a dangerous precedent to set, I think.
okay. Would the applicant like to weigh in again, Randy or Mr. Sims?
Well, I will speak to my part in this, and I can have Mr. Sims speak to his. But I did have this conversation with Matt, and I understand what Mike's saying and everybody's saying. It is irregular. It's irregular that the town owns a property and someone's using it. But as far as the ZBA goes, accepting the application isn't going to cause any problems with an ultimate decision that you guys make one way or another. That's totally up to you guys. There is really two basic issues that were brought late in this process that the planning board may want to know about, that the ZBA will know about, maybe get their opinions on. It isn't an encroachment issue. I don't know where that came from, but it is a public access issue and, pedestrian access question. And that's really, there's two facets to that, but that's really the question that you guys will probably end up wrestling with. I think probably this meeting that is supposed to take place will hopefully solve the different opinions on that. And that has not happened yet. But if it's the planning board's pleasure to at least know what's going on, I haven't a problem with explaining it, and I'm sure Mr. Sims doesn't.
Okay. Any other comments? Because I think that all of the required documents have been submitted, therefore the application is complete. I mean, that's my view of the application. And yes, sure, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. I appreciate your attention here. The project itself is ready to go. It has been ready to go for the last 6 months. And there have been no significant changes to the design, the construction, the configuration, anything that we intend to do. There is no encroachment on Bean property. About 6 months ago, we conceived of a ramp, a handicap ramp that would stretch out onto the Bean property. And I talked to Mr. Bean at that time and I said, would this be a problem? And he said, not at all. He may think that that's what the configuration still is. I have talked to him since then, but we didn't address the ramp issue. He wanted to know if he was going to be allocated a parking place in front of the museum. That's a question that he has asked me several times, and each time I refer it to the Public Works Director. But there is no encroachment on Bean property. I did ask him some time ago whether people could access the museum across his property. And he said, that's not an issue. That's not a problem. People cross that triangle of Bean Park all the time. And so there's a question of, do we want to include a pathway on that property, which is a question that Dave Ford is looking at with the Underwood plan for the upgrading of Railroad Avenue. It's not really our issue. So I appreciate the necessity to have every T crossed and I dotted and make sure that everything is done in accordance with the law. But as a practical matter, this project has been ready for a long time, and we just would like to get going.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to make a motion that this application is complete. And if somebody would like to second that, that would be helpful. If not, someone might want to make another motion. I don't hear any second for my motion to accept the application as complete, so that we could hear from any member of the public who might want to weigh in. Okay, then.
I'll second that.
You're seconding the motion for?
Yes,
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, then the motion has been made and seconded to accept the application as complete. All in favor? I need to do a roll call, sorry. Okay, Von Dugan?
Aye.
Yes, okay. Mike Potter?
No,
Okay, Peter Goodwin?
Yes.
Susan Replier? Susan?
Yes.
Brad Harriman?
yes.
Okay, Kathy Barnard, I'll vote yes. Okay, so motion has been made that the application is complete, so I am now going to open the public hearing. Is there any member of the public that wants to speak to the issue of the model railroad project, the museum? Is there a public member that?
Madam Chairman, may I take a little time, perhaps after the questions, to summarize the which we have here?
Okay, well, I'm trying to find out if there's any member of the public that wants to speak to the application. And I don't see any or hear any. So, okay, go ahead, Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There is in the application a list of items that need to be addressed, and I wonder if that would be a time to quickly run through them with our responses.
Well, okay.
All right. One of the criteria that govern what we are doing is the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. They are the criteria that are used by LCHUP in awarding grant money. And they are quite restrictive. For instance, one of them says the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize the property shall be avoided. And there are 10 of these restrictive requirements that are necessary in a rehabilitation project. And some of the proposed solutions to the handicap ramp issue violate these standards. And LCHIP will not approve proceeding and fund if the standards are violated. So this is a very restrictive set of goals that we have to stay within. In addition to which, we have the ADA rules, we have the problem of not crossing the site boundary, which Matt says is impossible to deal with. So in terms of the ramp, we have configured it to fit exactly within the space. We have pulled it back from the roadway so that when Public Works upgrades the road, there is no interference. And I think that from that viewpoint of the Bean property and the roadway, We are clear. So I'd like very quickly to go through the items under, is it 173.15.4? The site is relatively flat, and we've given spot elevations on the survey. The requirement is for 2-foot contours. They would not be useful. The paving of Railroad Avenue, if there's going to be a sidewalk, but it sounds like it may not be a sidewalk. Curbs, water management, and what have you are the town's responsibility. We will work with the town where their work abuts against the building, but we don't have any responsibility for what is done in curbing and the road work. That is planned to occur this year, so.
Well, isn't it your responsibility to have people be able to get into the museum safely?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
But that's another issue. I'm just talking about the physical road work.
Okay.
In terms of, the next one is for I, which is parking. The museum began by paying for the removal of the oil tanks, which freed up 7 parking spaces. You could say that the museum facilitated 7 parking spaces already. We will add another handicap one at the, I call it the north end of the building. It's really the northeast end of the building, but the one facing Glendon Street parking. The sewer and water utility connections will be made by the town, brought to underneath the building. We will then connect them to the building, but both sewer and water run under Railroad Avenue, so they're available. We will need to trench to get fiber and telephone connections to the building, and we will move the electric meter, which is currently on the entrance wall of the building. We will move it to mount it on the handicap ramp. And we talked to the electric department about that, and they're comfortable with that. The 4K, there'll be a small gated enclosure at the north end or the east end of the building with space for the air conditioning units and a pair of trash barrels. So that will deal with trash. So we'll deal with visitors to the museum. They will travel to the entrance of the ramp across the Bean property. They will come from Ridgeforce Path, or they'll come from the roadway. Most of our visitors will come on foot. This is different from the Boat Museum and the Wright Museum, where most of their visitors arrive by vehicle. Ours will come because they have parked elsewhere downtown. They will, in the summer, be doing other things downtown, and we'll add the museum visit because it's right in the middle of downtown to their schedule. In the winter, they will park downtown because the spots will be open. They'll be handier for them to get to. And so we expect the majority of our visitors to be walking to the building. If there is no sidewalk, then they will be encouraged by sight and by the direction of the pathway on to use Ridgeforce Path. Dave Ford has suggested the possibility, if there's no sidewalk, that maybe Ridgeforce Path be paved, but that's another question that is really a town issue and raises all sorts of other issues about what do the snowmobilers do and so forth. The museum will be open to the public for about 8 months of the year. The winter time with snow on the ground, the museum will not be open to the general public. It will be open to groups, to family groups, to church groups, school groups, and what have you. So there'll be activity there, but it will not be totally open to the public. So that's how we think that the safest way to get to the sidewalk, we feel, is a real asset, and it's a shame that it's being considered not to be there. I see families walking from Glendon Street parking into town, And if it's a group of people, they like to walk on the roadway rather than bridge force path. Bridge force path can be wet, can be we pick up gravel. It's not so comfortable as walking on a nice clean blacktop, which is what Railroad Avenue will be. So there will be I think there are some arguments for maintaining a sidewalk, but that's not our issue. It's out the sidewalk, then access will be primarily from bridge force path. And so that's how we will get people in. We have moved the handicap ramp down a bit. I sent a sketch to Matt this afternoon showing that the handicap ramp is quite clear of any roadway construction. And we've removed the steps that would have brought people down close to the road. And so now
Okay, so we don't have a final plan, is that what you're saying?
No, we have a plan. We have a final plan.
You just said you sent a plan to Matt?
Can I speak to this?
Sure.
We are actively trying to figure out what the proper configuration is for the ADA ramp, both in the context of the location of the sidewalk and the use of pedestrian areas on the Bean property. I want to comment quickly on the encroachment issue. There is no encroachment issue, but there is certainly, Kathy, to your point, the potential for a pedestrian use issue encroaching on the property. I agree with you. We are actively trying to solve the issue. John and the folks on his end are doing a great job to try and appease our concerns, but we are actively trying to work out how ADA access is best achieved. I do not believe that we have finalized that design. That's my principal and perhaps only substantial concern remaining with the application, but it is a concern. Mr. Sims, Public Works Director, and others on the team, I believe, need to stake out exactly where the proposed access will be, recognizing fully that by the LCHIP funding, via the LCHIP funding, there are some restrictions on where it can practically be placed. And some of the recommendations that we have made are not possible. We do recognize that. That said, I did receive a sketch from Mr. Sims today. It did revise the proposed ramp by removing the steps that are shown on the plan that's within your packet. And therefore, the only access provided to the museum entrance would be via the ADA ramp. That move was made particularly because I had expressed concerns about those steps being very close to the proposed road layout right-of-way and the traveled way for vehicles. So the take home, in my opinion, is that we are trying to resolve the issue of access. It has not been resolved in full. Whether or not the board entertains a conditional approval is ultimately up to them, but I do feel that there's additional field
plan. We need a plan that we can either approve or not approve. I mean,
This project seems to me to be so amorphous that rather than having its ducks in a row, we have a herd of wandering willy-nilly across the field with no direction. We don't even have a plan. We don't have a special exception. We have a potential issue of quote encroachment, unquote, however it wants to be described. We have an issue of public access. We have an unresolved issue of the entire layout of Railroad Avenue.
right, yeah.
I can't see how this board can proceed much further than saying good luck in the future.
Right. Any other comments from planning board members?
I guess I have a question in that the board ended up accepting this plan as complete, but the more I hear about it, it seems less than complete. And so how do we deal with that particular issue?
I said the required documents had been submitted.
Okay, well, that says what you're saying, but to me, I don't have enough information, and it seems the more we hear about this, the more that it becomes a state of flux.
Yep.
May I make a comment, Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
The uncertainty here is the layout of Railroad Avenue. We had been working with the previous Underwood's idea and thinking that these represent pretty closely what the upgrade will be. In the last few weeks, we have learned that that's in question. So what we did is we moved the ramp and we removed the steps and moved the ramp away from the road by 3 extra feet so that it's totally clear, and the railroad layout, I mean the road layout, is free to do whatever it needs to do. We are clear of it. There's no longer an issue of interfering with what the Public Works wants to do with the road. It's the uncertainty of knowing where the curb is going to be and where whether or not there will be a sidewalk that has led to these changes. We're now assuming that there will be no sidewalk and that we just want to move the ramp. So there's no interference.
Okay, thank you. And still no member of the public, so apparently there's no one here representing the Bean family. So basically what we're left with that issue is for you folks to go ahead with the meeting and then report back to us, it seems. I mean, they legitimately brought an issue to us, and I think we have to address it, so.
And there are other issues still outstanding, Madam Chairman. I would like to.
Yes, that was, yes, okay.
I think we should move this application to a continuance.
Right. Okay, but can I, just a sec, Mike, what did you want to say? Matt, did you have a comment? Okay, then.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interfere unless there was going to be a motion. So I'll make a comment.
Okay, well, I want to make sure that we've got all the outstanding items listed. Because I agree with Mike. I think we need to continue this. We've got to deal with the issue of the special exception. I think the pedestrian safety is an issue. I don't know what we can do about the road layout, but it seems to be a very important part of this project to move ahead in order to address safety issues, unless I'm not looking at it correctly. And certainly the handicap ramp, I mean, we've got to deal with that issue. And whatever infringement or issues that the Bean family, I think, need to be addressed. And Mike had some issues. I think we need to follow up on his concerns. And I don't know, do other planning board members have issues that we should be looking at?
At this time, I'd move that we continue this hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Seconded.
Okay, until what date?
Matt?
We do have another meeting in June.
Well, if I'm having some network issues, I'm being told by Community TV, so I apologize. But if the board is continuing until it gets more details on the ramp layout, then I think it's appropriate to continue it 2 weeks, because I think it's important to address this quickly. If the board is continuing until the Railroad Avenue layout is finalized, then this application will not be approved in short order. That layout has been moved to the front of the priority list based on this project, but we will not have a final design in 2 weeks. So if the ask is for us to address the ramp issue only, I think we can do that in 2 weeks, and I would recommend a continuance instead to the June 16th meeting. And the special exception, if that's the board's pleasure, I would continue to June 16th at 7 p.m.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, we've been talking about safety issues for pedestrians, so I don't know if that has to do necessarily with the road layout, but that's got to be addressed. That's our responsibility as a planning board.
I agree, Madam Chair. I do agree with that. I'm not trying to diminish those concerns at all. I'm just saying that the Railroad Avenue layout final concept will not be available within a month. So I want to try and move this application forward with the board's comfort. But I don't want to promise that we will have a final concept if that's not going to be a realistic possibility. But I believe that the pedestrian issues, particularly based on the conversation I've been having with Mr. Sims, can be addressed with a site meeting, a staking out of where the proposed access will be, and a real conversation about what the pedestrian access will actually look like for the Railroad Avenue corridor. To Mr. Sims' point, the idea of the sidewalk was a nice concept when it was initially drafted as part of 3 alternatives. But the realities of Railroad Avenue, because the building is not being moved, is that the right-of-way is very, very narrow. And what we need to do is consciously weigh, is it best to force a sidewalk in with no protection for motorists? Or is it best to create a pedestrian way along the Bridge Falls path that protects them from them? And I think that's the reason why we're moving in a certain direction. And I am apologetic to Mr. Sims for our change in direction, because we certainly have done some of that. But the reality is that we have now married these 2 projects together intimately. And if we're going to make a decision and move Mr. Sims's project forward, we need to at least have a better sense of what the layout is going to look like. And we can't simply condition this application upon the approval of a final concept to be determined at some later point in time.
No, that we couldn't, not agreed. Agreed.
I would like to know, for the next meeting that we have, Dave Ford's opinion about the layout that we will see that we don't even have here.
Can we do that, Matt?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Why don't we simply continue this meeting until the next meeting 2 weeks from now, and
The
see how
16th. Yeah,
and see how many of Mr. Sims's ducks are in a row at that time. And
okay,
if there are any outstanding issues, worst comes to worst, we can continue again to a subsequent meeting to get the remaining issues cleared up. But
Okay.
rather than just stalling it for now, let's move it on to the next meeting 2 weeks from now, see where we stand at that time.
okay, you all comfortable with that? Because I have a motion and a second to continue this until June 16th. Everyone's comfortable. I'm going to go through the roll call vote. Von Dugan,
Yes,
Mike Hodder,
Yes,
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Replier,
yes,
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. Am in favor of the continuance. Okay, so anyone who's interested, and of course the applicants will have this on the agenda for June 16th at 7 o'clock. And thank you very much, folks.
Madam
Okay,
Chairman,
go
may I
ahead.
ask a question?
Um,
Will we have a resolution to the issues that Mike Hodder brought up?
John, is that regarding the authorization?
Yes, I mean, the
Yes.
concerns that he had, can we
Yes,
have resolution of those?
John, I will secure a legal opinion on the authorization issue that was raised by Mr. Hodder in order to cleanse that issue, if in fact
Okay.
that's the way that the legal opinion reads.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
okay, and Mike, did you have anything else?
John beat me to it. I was gonna ask the
Okay.
same question.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
We'll now read the next item into the record. The next application, Nary Shore Road LLC and Sun Realty Trust, Nary Shore Road and Gateway Road. This is tax map and lot 201-35, 36, 37, and unnumbered right-of-way. Case 2020-17. This is a boundary line adjustment for 4 lots.
Madam
Yes, go ahead.
May I just point out that in this application, we have owner applicants and agents, a proper form of application in contrast to what we had presented to us before. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Rhines, you're the agent here, and so you're going to go through the application for us, right?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Okay, then go for it.
Okay, Matt, do you want to share the screen so I can put the plan up?
Just waiting on you, Jim.
Isn't that always the case?
Good evening, Jim.
Okay. Good evening. For the record, I'm Jim Rhines from White Mountain Survey and Engineering. I'm here representing the Brett and Jill Sumption Trust and Nary Shore Realty LLC and their request for the reconfiguration of existing non-conforming lots. As Kathy mentioned, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. The lots in question are tax map 20135, 20136, 20137, and an unnumbered right-of-way that starts here at the west side and continues on and goes all the way up to Wolfeboro Common. The property is zoned residential and shorefront residential. You can see the zoning boundary here where I'm moving. We have applied for a reconfiguration of existing non-conforming lots under Article Roman 7, Section 175-55C. Specifically 175-55C2 allows the planning board to decrease the acreage and the frontage upon a finding that the overall configuration is improved. And this application takes 4 existing lots and reduces it to 3. And if you'll give me just a moment, the configuration 235-5 in this location is 19,847 square feet, or just under a half acre. That's going to be eliminated and absorbed into 20136, which is 20,744 square feet, or again, slightly less than a half acre. And it will also pick up this area A of the unnumbered right-of-way. So this will all become a single lot of record, and it will be 1.01 acres in size. 20137 would go from 1 acre, just barely over 1 acre, to 1.16 acres, and it would pick up this portion of the right-of-way that would be added here. As you'll see, though Nary Shores Road is platted here, where it was constructed, once it came down through here, it stayed in the right-of-way, then it dips down, crosses a stormwater runoff. It does dry up a little bit, but it's very much a runoff, and it comes down into the lot here. So we would be proposing an access easement for this lot, but because Brett and the Sumptions own this in a trust, and by New Hampshire law, you cannot grant yourself an easement because you own all of the rights when you own the fee interest. This would be something that we could prepare a draft easement that could be reviewed by town council and be a requirement that it get recorded when and if the lots were ever sold out of common ownership. The remaining land, which goes from here, as I said, all the way up to the public portion of Nary Shores Road that the town took over in Wolfeboro Common. That lot is presently 2 let's see, 1.95, no, excuse me, it is 2.2 acres, and it would be reduced down to 1.95 acres. The intent would be, if possible, to convey this to the lot owners down here, form a formal association where no association exists today. The reason that we feel that this is better land planning, which is one of the requirements that the findings the board must have in order to grant this, is we're taking non-conforming lots and making or reducing the number of non-conforming lots. And so this lot, which could be a building permit, could be applied for, and a residential home could be constructed on it. We're eliminating that possibility, and we're taking an existing shorefront lot that is fairly intensely developed for the size of it, and we're making it less percentage of lot coverage, which is an improvement for the lot going forward. Additionally, this lot, which again, an application can be made, it allows for a larger building envelope that would make this a more conforming building envelope and require less relief if it were ever developed in the future. And then the fact that the remaining land could unnumbered right-of-way could be conveyed to an association. We think that would be a better situation if all of the parties can come to an agreement. And that's the overview of it. I would be happy to answer any questions that the board or the public may have.
Okay, did you ask for a waiver or not?
We did not ask for any waivers.
No waivers. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've got some concerns. Lot 39, I think, should have been included in the legal notice. Well, first, this was a non-conforming subdivision. It was subdivided, I think, back in the 60s or 70s. Basically, what you've done with this layout and taking away the right-of-way is you've eliminated the frontage. The main lot, lot 36, it now has no frontage. And it also has taken away the frontage for lot 39, which you have not included in the legal notice. And I think that's a technical issue in my mind anyway. It is. The frontage for the lot 37 would be off of the remaining right-of-way. So that would be diminished. At least it would, you've got a lot with some frontage. Otherwise, I think that creates a problem. So you're creating one lot with no frontage at all. You're making lot 39 non-conforming, even more non-conforming by taking away its frontage. So I've got some issues with this proposal. I think you've got to read the legal notice. That's my thought anyway. The other issue is this right-of-way. I've talked to many people been so excited about this right-of-way. Apparently you can get on it in Port Wayland and go all the way to Cricket Hill. And when I was on the Pathways Committee, Paul Damaris was always trying to get us to, get that firmed up so that we could have that as a pathway, because it's always been a right-of-way. Is there anything in the deeds? I know people are still using it. It's not that it's not being used as a pathway. So basically, the reconfiguration of lot 36 would take away the ability, if this right-of-way is a legitimate right-of-way. So I'm wondering if you have looked into that, Jim.
This is the first I've heard of anybody making use of it. When I've been physically out there, there is absolutely no evidence that anyone has walked out across this, across
Okay.
that stream through the deep trough. And we didn't find any legal allowance for people to be doing that.
Nothing on that, the right-of-way that we're now eliminating, or the proposal is to eliminate.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And
Question for-
as far as reducing the frontage, your reconfiguration of non-conforming lots does give you the authority to reduce it. And I
To
point out,
reduce it, but not eliminate it. That's what my concern is. I agree that it can be reduced, but you're actually eliminating it on lot 36 and 39, which isn't even mentioned in the notice.
well,
So,
39, if it is a defect, there are no abutters that were not notified, and it's the same ownership. So I think it's by virtue of anyone being on to the meeting, I would think that might be a self-storing. I just
To
listened to what Matt
take
had to
away
say.
frontage, to take away frontage from a lot that is not noticed. I mean, we're supposed to be, we're the planning board, and we're kind of supposed to look ahead to the future.
That would be the purpose of the easement. Because right now, there's
Okay.
essentially a prescriptive easement, because those lots, if they weren't all in common ownership, people have not been using the platted right-of-way. The road is not in it
Right,
through any of the lots involved.
okay,
So that's why we felt that that this wasn't, this isn't sort of a conventional. I think I would agree with you, Kathy, if the road were constructed in the right-of-way, but since it is not, and
okay,
you would,
okay,
in
but we
order
do have an approved subdivision plan. How do you address that issue?
approved subdivisions aren't prohibited from reconfiguration of existing non-conforming lots.
But you can make, generally, you don't make things more non-conforming.
Well, if in the view, the overall reconfiguration is better, and it's just our position that if an easement is granted over the road that is actually being used, and we're reducing the number of lots on an area that is non-conforming so close to the lake, that this would be an improvement.
Okay. Okay, okay, so are you done with your presentation then? Because I wanted to ask Matt if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions.
Right, yeah, okay. Go ahead, Matt, if you want to make some comments.
Well, I would focus my first comment on the fact that I look at the intent of frontage to be access to a property, and where any approval granted by this board for this reconfiguration would include conditions requiring that access be granted to any resulting lot. I would agree with you, Kathy, that the frontage is being eliminated, but the intent of the frontage being access is not. I believe that is being preserved through the proposal. But Kathy, you and I have discussed this. I think we do have some good questions about the platted right-of-way and the implication of that upon the application. I want to let the board know that I did reach out to legal counsel on the matter. Unfortunately, I have a lot of legal questions in right now to our counsel and did not receive, and I see Mike chuckling, but I did not receive a response to that in a timely manner before this evening's meeting. I see there really being two questions, one being whether the board has the legal authority under the ordinance to make the adjustment. I think in that case, there's no question that it does, but to Kathy's concern, The elimination of a platted right-of-way gets to the second question, and that is this in keeping with land use best practices? And ultimately, that is a subjective decision that can only be made by the board. If the board feels uncomfortable this evening, and I've made Mr. Rhines aware of this, although I'm not trying to lead the board in a specific direction, we can certainly address some of these legal questions before an approval is granted. But I think, in my opinion, the board has the authority to approve this reconfiguration. And lastly, I would just comment that on the question of notice, there is no boundary line changing with that lot, Kathy. And I recognize that there is frontage changing, but the reason that from a technical perspective that we did not include that in the notice is that there is no physical change to the lot. But I would agree, and further, there's no physical change in that the access is not being modified to the lot either. But I agree that it's a question we could ask. I'm happy to do that, but I believe that the legal notice was done correctly.
Okay, even though we've taken away the frontage, the approved frontage for this lot, that's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and Kathy, that's my opinion. I'm not an attorney. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'd also be curious if the intent was to connect this Nary Road Shores, whatever it's called, all the way through to the neighboring property that we don't see here. Because it looks like it specifically went to that property line. It even looks like it goes beyond it.
Yeah, it does.
So that concerns me, because I think when you can provide roadways that loop from a safety perspective, it's much better. And also, I was on that same pathways committee, and I do recall those discussions about potential bike routes and other things.
Matt, can you share the screen for a second? So I believe, just so you see, the boundary line, this lot here, their boundary comes up to here. There's no right of way in here. So unless these people are willing to grant something, and this owner was willing to grant rights that don't exist today, I don't believe, whether the Pathways Committee or people have been using it, there's a legal right for that at this present time.
So that dashed line that we see up the top is a boundary line and not a right-of-way line?
That's a boundary line between Toccio and Horan.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Jim,
Okay, it was brought to my attention, so I thought that I had to mention it.
No, I don't disagree.
Mike, was that you?
Yeah, a couple of questions for Jim. This Helen Nary right-of-way, this was never plotted?
It was platted on reference 14, which was a subdivision plat that created, I think these two lots existed. I can open that plan if it would help the board in any deliberation.
My question simply is this right-of-way, the Helen Nary right-of-way, is it a paper road or is it a real road?
It's a paper road because it was never constructed.
Okay.
Here, Mike, you can see the road is constructed, and then it dips down here and continues on. This is, as you can see, there's wetland here and this runoff that runs down through.
Right.
There's a 27-inch culvert here, and the road it becomes a driveway to these two lots, and presumably it would be, off of, they would develop these lots off of that.
All right, then the next question is how would you respond to Kathy's concerns about access to the lots which would be disappearing was it with the surrender of territory by the right of way?
So this lot 20139 would be granted an easement across it for access to the new 20136. And the new 20137 has 35 feet here where it would just come onto it.
Yeah, that one, it's clear that one does have frontage. I agree.
The other one would require an easement.
This one would, yes,
Yeah.
the new lot here.
That would require an easement, and we can make
Yes.
that a condition of approval.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
If you want
I
to
would
approve
point-
lots without frontage.
Yeah, I would just point out, Mike, that because they're all held in common ownership now, an easement couldn't be recorded, but we can prepare an easement that could be reviewed by town council, put in the file, and it could be put on the notice of decision, which does get recorded and can be recorded.
Yeah,
So
I understand.
Okay.
Okay, Jim, you're pretty well set. Matt, did you have any other comments that you wanted to make? Or
No, I think we've addressed the bulk of the concerns in my review, and obviously I've talked to both you and Jim about some concerns leading up to the meeting. So I think everything that I've been concerned about has been addressed.
okay, planning board members, do you have any other questions?
One
I
other
have a-
question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a comment. If I were the Sims Realty Trust and hadn't been noticed on this, I would be shocked.
Right. That was,
I think that that's a problem, whether or not we technically touch the land or not. It's requiring an easement. It seems very pertinent to their concerns.
I'm
Where is
sorry,
this,
what lot? Because all the Assumption is the common owner of all lots.
All right,
Okay. Oh, it's just not being merged with the other.
Correct.
Okay. Never
I
mind.
have one other question for Jim. Do you know in whose favor the right of way had been originally granted? Was it to the entire subdivision?
Yeah, the purpose of it, yes, was for the subdivision, to create the lots that plan prepared. It was the survey of shore lots for Nary Farm for Helen Nary in 1960.
Do the other lots in that old subdivision have an interest in the surrender of part of the territory in favor of access to or increasing the size of the lot at the end of the right of way?
If they have any rights in them, they are not extinguished by your action. We don't believe that they do, but if they did, then they would have the same rights that they have now by on the newly configured lots.
By virtue of the fact that the portion of the right of way going away does not deny any other lot in the subdivision access along that right of way.
Right. I mean, the right of way would cease to exist, but if anyone has any rights, we don't believe that they do, but if they do, since Nary Shore Road LLC acquired the title to it, it just by virtue of them acquiring title, they didn't extinguish anyone's rights in them. So if anyone has rights in for instance in area A and area B, those rights would still exist. They would just be on different lots now rather than in the right of way.
Right, okay.
And since the road isn't there, it would basically be pedestrian in nature if they exist.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
okay, any other comments, questions, then it does, this application is considered complete. Would somebody be willing to make a motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
Okay, motion's been made, and somebody want to second the motion to accept the application complete? Did somebody do that?
Second, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, roll call vote on accepting the application is complete. Von Dugan,
Yes.
Mike Hodder,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Replier,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. I vote in the affirmative. So now that the application has been accepted as complete, I can open the public hearing. Is there any member of the public that wants to comment on this application? If there is, now is the time to make your comments.
Hi, this is Teresa Tosio.
Okay.
So my question is, the lot as it is right now currently is buildable, and this change would then make the lot unbuildable?
You want me to answer that, Kathy?
Yes, would you please, Jim?
Yes, so the lot 20135 that's going to be absorbed into 20136 could be, a residence could be built on that now. And so when it's merged into this other lot, they will only, instead of 2 potential residences, now they'll only be able to be 1 on that common lot. Or that,
Okay.
that newly configured lot.
Okay. Thank you for the full clarification. So could they build outbuildings? Barns or?
Yes, yeah, they could build out buildings. The current 20136 has a bunkhouse and it has a dwelling. So they could, they could reconfigure, they could build a garage, they could do other improvements.
Okay,
Whatever was permitted by zoning.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, and there are also plans to build on lot 37. That's what you had indicated.
There are none presently, but that option, does exist.
Right, okay. All right. Other member of the public want to comment? Okay, I just wanted to acknowledge that we did receive a letter that I forwarded on to the planning board members from some neighbors in that area. They were concerned about drainage issues, and this really is a boundary line adjustment, so there's no construction taking place.
Suzanne, could you mute your microphone? Suzanne?
Yeah, I was just waiting to get recognized.
Oh, okay, well, that's okay. I asked
Okay,
for
sorry.
comments from public, so you're on.
Well, it's more or less an observation or a question. I tuned in a little bit late, but in the old days in planning, we used to deliberately leave on a right-of-way access to back lots, so that, to Vaughn's point, I think I understood, there could be continuances of a road for further development. Do you have history on the previous approval for that subdivision as to why they left it like they did?
Well, it looked like a pretty traditional subdivision to me. We do have the map. That's about the only history we have. But it shows.
Do you have the records, the minutes of the planning board where the minutes would reflect why they approved it as laid out like that?
I actually did review the minutes of at least one of the 70s vintage subdivisions, and it was not clear why they had configured it the way that they did, other than I think they had tried to gain road frontage for the proposed lots. I'm not sure if Mr. Rhines has done more investigation than that, but it actually appeared to be a very traditional subdivision, Suzanne. There didn't appear to be, although I don't know, there didn't appear to be any real discussion of actually continuing a through road based on what I saw in the minutes. But as you know, 1970s vintage minutes tend to be very brief, and these were certainly.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments? Planning board members? Matt, you had some conditions? Did you
Yes,
consider?
Madam Chair. I recommended a total of 6 conditions, and I'd like to amend one of the conditions that I've presented here. Condition number 1, however, would be the incorporation of the plans as amended to the date of this approval as reference as part of this approval. That would be both the plan of boundary line adjustment, really the base plan, and then the plan showing Nary Shores Road more completely. Second, the applicant shall be responsible for Mylar plan for recording at the Carroll County Registry of Deeds and the responsibility for payment of all recording fees associated with that. Third, the applicant shall be responsible for the submission of a certificate of monumentation and updated plans, obviously reflecting that monumentation. Item number 4, I would like to slightly amend. Item number 4 was easement shall be prepared to the satisfaction of town council to ensure that all proposed lots maintain access prior to the signing of plans. I would simply like to add on to that, that those easements would be recorded when and if the lots are sold out of common ownership at that time. So I would add on again, and recorded when and if lots are sold out of common ownership, on to condition number 4. Condition number 5 is that all of the documentation submitted within the application package is incorporated as part of the approval. And condition number 6 is that a final boundary line adjustment or lot reconfiguration plan shall be submitted. It's a bit redundant, but with the original stamp of a licensed land surveyor. And you can disregard the note about waivers as none were requested for this project. Those are conditions 1 through 6 as amended.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And in this particular case, the planning board needs to make a finding, and that's under 175-55C2, where it says acreage lot frontage of individual lots may be decreased, and I would like to emphasize the word decreased, upon a finding of the planning board that the overall configuration of the lots is improved. I entertain a motion on this application, but we do need to include the finding also.
Okay. Do you want a motion, Madam Chairman?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'd be happy to move that the planning board approve case number 2020-17, tax map lot numbers 20135, 36, 37/ROW, boundary line adjustments on the basis of a finding that approval of the reconfiguration both reduces non-conformity and reduces lot coverage.
And reduces a non-conforming lot.
Correct.
I want to include that. Okay. Okay. Okay, so motion has been made. Somebody want to second that motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I needed to close the public hearing, so now I'm going to close the public hearing a little after the fact here. Okay, now the roll call vote. Von Dugan,
Yes.
Mike Hodder,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Replier,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. I'm going to vote no. I don't think this is a good land use decision. I don't believe that that section of the ordinance says that we should eliminate frontage. It says frontage may be decreased, and we actually ended up eliminating frontage from the one lot that's doubling its size, and then one lot that was not mentioned in the legal notice. And I feel very uneasy about that, just thinking ahead to the future. But anyway, that's the vote. And thank you very much, Jim. And the
Thank you very much.
okay, and now oh, you're here for the next one too. Okay.
Yes, I am. I'm like a
Okay.
bad penny.
All right, just a minute. On to the next application. This is from Gala, Global Awareness Local Action Community Center, 23 Bay Street, tax map and lot 203-70, case 2020-18. This is a site plan review. This is for a phased renovation and parking layout for this applicant. Okay, Jim and Josh is here also. Hi, Josh. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm getting my plans open just so that I can have things set.
Hi, everyone, and also Steve is here.
Jim, I'm sorry.
One of our architects.
Jim, do you want control now or?
Yeah, just a second, Matt. Okay. So I can take control, Matt, if you want to give it to me.
Okay, so Jim, this one you do have a waiver.
Yes, I do, Kathy.
Okay, all right, so you'll speak to that.
I will.
Hey.
Okay. Again, for the record, Jim Rhines from White Mountain Survey and Engineering, and I'm here representing GALA, or Global Awareness Local Action, for a phased site plan application. Also with me is Steve Hoffman, who is the project architect, and as Kathy mentioned, Josh Arnold, who is the executive director of GALA, is also here. The parcel is located at 23 Bay Street, tax map 203, lot 70. It is 19,325 square feet, or 0.44 acres, with 244 feet of frontage on Bay Street. It is zoned the Bay Street Limited Business District. This property received site plan approval in 1994 with 16 parking spaces. And this, I'm sure everybody knows, but this was the site of the former Wolfeboro Power and Equipment. This request is a phased project that, when complete, will bring the property into greater conformity with the site plan and zoning requirements by reducing the non-conforming parking standards and non-conforming parking area. Which presently has 5,135 square feet of parking that is approved, that is non-conforming, and 16 spaces. And when we're done, there would be 4,311 square feet of non-conforming parking, but the spaces would be increased to 20, 2 of which would be handicap. So it would result in a greater conformity. I'm going to switch now to a different plan. This was the existing conditions plan. Forgive me just a second here. So, paving or the gravel parking, but they will put on some planters and that are outlined here in green, and some boulders to try and better define and just, eliminate the possibility of people parking here in front of the building. A new access point will be here, and parking will be delineated on the existing pavement and gravel with either parking markers or tape like you could use on a clay tennis court. So that would be the first phase. In the second phase, you would see that, I'll zoom in again, there would be site improvements which would take out all of the pavement in this area and around here, and the concrete that's here, some in this location, and some gravel over in here. And it would add landscaping trees to bring all of the landscaping in compliance with the site plan regulations. Same number of parking spaces, still 2 handicap parking spaces, and a sidewalk would be added since all of this pavement would be removed. We would go from, in the existing condition, 91.3% impervious down to 78% impervious, making it more conforming. As I'm speaking about that, one of the reasons Kathy mentioned we are requesting a waiver, we're asking for a waiver from the drainage requirements, since we are ultimately reducing the amount of impervious coverage, ultimately by, just get my notes here, ultimately by 2,579 square feet. The property is presently connected to municipal sewer and water, and as the building is going through the code requirements, if it needs sprinklering and the service connection needs to be upgraded, that would happen at that time. There is no proposed external dumpsters. Solid waste will be stored in the building. We are seeking a freestanding sign that would be compliant with the Wolfeboro regulations, and that would be applied for in a separate sign application. We also, as I mentioned, Steve Hoffman is here as the architect. Because of the new standards relating to the building, you used to have voluntary review guidelines, and now they've been formalized. Steve has prepared a waiver with regard to those requirements contained in section 173-19B8 C, E, and A, and I would be happy to defer to Steve to speak to those at this point.
Okay, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here tonight. Matt, have you shared with the committee already the sections of the standards that you cited in your review?
Yes, I have. I did share them directly in my review, and if it would be helpful to you, it looks like Jim has control there, but I'm happy to show the waiver request form that you sent me earlier today as well. But I did share the specific 3 sections that I felt needed relief from the planning board if the application is to proceed.
Sure.
Matt, you could take over control. Steve prepared the waiver, and he emailed it to me, but I haven't, it's not on this. So if you could do it, that would be great.
Sure, I'll do that right now. Let me just pull up this waiver request form, folks. Apologies.
And has everyone had a chance to review the building elevations so that we know what we're discussing in terms of the proposed?
Yes, we did.
Or do I need? would
I
it
have
be
a
helpful if
question about phasing. And
Yes.
it appears that in the section and the plan of the upstairs, that the first phase includes only the stairwell area dormer.
That is correct. We understand that we will need to apply for, possibly apply for a special exception for the other two dormers because they fall actually within the setback on the building. If you zoomed in on the site plan, you could see where kind of the northeastern corner of the existing site, the existing building footprint is clipped by the setback from Bay Street. And this is where we would propose 2 additional dormers. The one that falls over the entry is totally within the setback. So we're going for that as of right. And sometime, I would like to share with you the proposed phase 2 elevation, because I think it helps to make our case why the dormers both help to enhance the building relative to some of these questions about the design standards. But obviously we've got to go through our due process to have that reviewed as an encroachment, slight as it may be. I think it's even less than 50 square feet or less than 100 square feet that we're adding onto an existing second story. We're just pushing the roof out as a dormer to gain more accessible space.
So would this be built with just this one dormer first and then expanded on in the future?
Well, we would hope to, in terms of construction, gain these 2 dormers in phase 1. There's 2 things at play though. 1, we've got to get through the exception, and 2, we're not quite sure if we can afford them in our phase 1 budget. So we're going to be listing them at bidding time as an alternate. So we'll have to see at the time of the bids. As I'm sure many of you are aware, construction costs are quite high right now. So we have a base bid, which includes that primary entry dormer, and then we have an alternate for phase 1. And if we can't get them in phase 1, then come a year and a half from now, when we get additional funding through GALA, we will construct them pending approval in phase 2. But the ultimate goal is to have all 3 dormers built. Both.
And is the back, the rear dormer toward the wetlands or towards actually the driveway to the wolf trap? Is that planned for phase 1 or never?
That is planned for phase 2 right now. And again, it is also technically within the setback on that side of the building, so would require approval via special exception, and it would also be budget dependent. We're trying to do a lot on this existing building just to get it to be up to code and to be a good functioning facility for GALA and their diverse programs. So this whole thing is kind of a moving target in terms of what can be afforded. But I think in an ideal world, we would build the dormers on both sides within the first 2 phases. But at this time, we are only really proposing phase 1, the single dormer. Though we will be coming back for the exception, should that be deemed necessary.
And just to clarify, ultimately, would you be taking off the whole roof to accommodate all those dormers?
No, in fact, we're not removing the existing roof structure at all. Do you mean the surface of the roof or the?
No, I mean the frame of it. It's built to accommodate those?
Yes, if you refer to the section that's part of your package, I think that is going to be sheet 301. And if you guys are familiar with that building, you know it's one of these bizarre kind of gambrel, gable, derivative structures that there are several of there on Bay Street, except that it's quite large in the cross section. So there's the center portion of the second floor is a large truss that spans and then sits on these little mansard knee walls. Can you all see what I'm describing in that section on page A301? If it's helpful, I could bring it up on my screen and share it, or Matt, you could share it.
Steve, could you do that? Because I'm not sure I have the architecturals handy on my machine. Can I share my presenter view with you?
Yeah, please do. I haven't done this on GoToMeeting yet, so pardon me if I'm
very easy.
Okay.
So I'm going to make you the presenter right now.
Okay.
You should see some sort of indication, and Jim may know better what you'll see, but I think you'll have screen share in just a second.
Bingo, here it comes.
There we go, great.
Everybody can see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so what I am, give me a second to kind of get into comment mode here. So the existing building traces that shape, right? It's mansarded on both sides and then has a gable in the middle. And what we're doing is along the bearing line of the current mansard knee wall that supports the trusses, we're headering off in sections like you would in a house, about a 10 or 12 foot span, and then creating the dormers poking out of that. So we will only be removing the existing mansard in the sections where the dormers would be protruding. If that, is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
I did enjoy reading in the standards that the mansard roof is not encouraged within Wolfeboro, and so we're doing our best to do away with that on this building.
That was a contention at times.
Let's see, while I've got you on screen share here, I did want to go back to this. This is our proposed phase 2, final elevation for Bay Street. And maybe it's premature to bring this up because we're really considering at this time just this, which is the single dormer. But I'm going to ask that you kind of consider the composition of all this in regard to the end result, which is that we really think that the rhythm of the 3 dormers brings some very nice verticality to what is normally a very kind of, horizontal and not very nice building in terms of this huge roof that just faces Bay Street. And we also feel that the rhythm of the windows that the dormers allow, and then this kind of emphasis you can see in these lower windows even, and even more so in these higher windows, you start to get some of those vertical proportions that you are seeking in your design standards, while also paying, if you will, respect to the fact that this is a very horizontal building in terms of a bar being capped at the end with, the best we can do for vertical. I would say, maybe it's a stretch, but it's somewhat like the composition of your town hall in that you really have an articulated horizontal base. And then that's grounded at one end by kind of a heavy vertical element. And then above that, you have a nice rhythm of large scale windows appropriate to the kind of scale of the spaces behind it and the civic quality of the building. And then also a roof line that kind of has some up and down to it rather than just a strong horizontal, which is what is there now. And we find maybe rather unappealing, and we want to get away from that eventually. So,
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, may I just ask Steve to review the waivers
Yes,
specifically while he's on this topic?
Right.
Could
No,
you
I
just-
was,
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to jump in. I
Go
just wanted
ahead.
to make sure we had screen share. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Let me make sure I got this up too, because I think I do, but I want to make sure. Oh, here it is. No. No, 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 no. All right, guys. Here we go. Here we go. Here's what I sent everybody. So the three sections of the code that Matt cited was the reference to the vertical orientation of the windows, the use of large glass windows, and the use of traditional materials. Speaking to the composition of the windows, the orientation of the windows, the scale of the windows, I'm just making a general note here that the form and composition of the existing building being asymmetric, the context of most of the surrounding buildings being non-historic, everything within several hundred yards of this building is probably something of the same era, built, as a commercial building. I'm going to say 1960-ish, maybe the original structures. The scale and proportion of the building is characteristic of non-residential architecture. This is a very large building, kind of clunky and wide, if you will. It doesn't have any of the the nice proportion of traditional New England buildings to begin with, not even in the pitch of the roof. And that the use of the building is going to be institutional, educational, community-based, rather than being retail or quasi-domestic, professional in its presentation. So all of that being said, we feel that the proposed design is appropriate to both kind of the nature of the existing building and its context and use, and that rather than trying to slap on a bunch of maybe standard compliant historically proportioned windows that I think would end up looking awkward on this building to begin with, because it's just not that type of building. We tried to develop a scheme that was still compositionally pleasing, did start to get towards some of the goals of having human scale and proportion in the building and being appropriate, if you will, if it's not necessarily historic or traditional. That's
Okay.
my
All right. Any
deal.
questions from planning board members?
Not
Well,
for me.
I'm curious how you think it fits into, not historic's not really part of it, just Wolfeboro, the feel, the character of the town.
Well, it's an interesting thing, like downtown Wolfeboro, I'm bringing up some images here. That's the existing building. We can all agree it's pretty bad, right? This building doesn't exist on Main Street, if you will, and I think would have a hard time fitting in there no matter what you did to it. But we did think about some of the buildings that are there on Main Street, some of the long buildings, such as Black's, for instance, that again, there's a strong base that's articulated with some larger windows. There you have, I think, a building that was traditionally residential or perhaps small office related to the retail below, but it was, the scale of the windows above, I think, has to do with being smaller spaces and replicating more of a residential scale of architecture. There's nothing residential about this building when we get done with it. This is going to be a very large studio space on the second floor, a series of large communal function spaces, flexible function spaces on the ground floor. The only thing that will be remaining sort of as single rooms will be the two offices that will occupy the upstairs on this end of Bay Street. And we've kept the windows in that smaller proportion. We're also, for budgetary reasons, we are trying to fit in a little bit of the openings, at least on this wing, within the existing structural openings there. could we, what could we do to make it feel more like Main Street? Again, I feel like it might be a lost cause. We obviously are respecting the pitched roof, just the general sort of agriculturally derivative roof form. There was some debate about whether to have the shed dormers be pitched or flat, and the reason why we chose flat, which you can see in, you can see in this section, is that just structurally the way that it worked to get usable head height at the edge, the pitch, pitching would either require us to bring it way back to the gable, which would look kind of awful and not really be contextual, or you lose usable head height at the edge. And actually what we're going to do on this flat membrane roof is incorporate some more, some green roofing that's going to absorb some of the runoff from this side of the building. So I think we're going to go even beyond our 78% reduction, hopefully get down to, closer to 70 or below in terms of taking some of the stormwater runoff off of the site. That was a goal of Gala. In the large part, we are maintaining on this facade the wood siding, rather than, we're going to replace the existing kind of board and batten that's in bad shape here with a what they call reverse board and batten. So rather than having the batten be what's protruding on the outside, the boards will meet and have a reveal. It'll be a little bit more, I think, less barn-like looking. But we'll retain some of the texture of a traditional wood-sided building, again, appropriate to kind of a, what to me is really an agricultural reference rather than a domestic reference in architecture in this building. We are also trying to use, let's see if I can go back to this one. This is our entry canopy that we're showing here on the Bay Street facade, and you can see it a little bit better on from the side here. This is viewed from the east end of the building where there's going to be parking. And we're trying to keep that scale very human. It's low and it's sort of at the same scale of this existing shed that's on the west side of the building. So we're trying to do some moves like that just to help break down the what is really, this is a very imposing facade, not very friendly and not very scaled at all. So those are the things I think that we are consciously doing to try and to meet the design standards and to bring it within the context of some other buildings, in terms of height and scale and.
Okay.
From my point of view, I think. From my point of view, it looks like you're trying to take a building which is old, was built the way it was, and try to make it as nice as possible.
Well, in a nutshell, yes. That's true. Without a lot of money, to be frank.
Okay, other comments or questions?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I think the design is an overall improvement on the old Wolfeboro Power Building. Given its neighbors in that part of Bay Street, it's going to be the most attractive of the bunch that are down there. I think it's a nice design, a great improvement. And if you're interested, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve the 4 waivers as requested.
Okay, that would be very helpful if you would do that. And they have been justified by the applicants.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be happy to make a motion that the board approve waivers from 173-21, 173-19 point cap B point 8 point lowercase c, 17319B8E, and 17319B11A.
Thank you. Somebody want to second that motion?
Seconded.
Second,
Okay, thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Roll call vote on the granting of the waivers. Von Dugan?
I think that this is a great improvement on what is there. I have a huge problem with all the different proportions of the windows. I think the materials are fine. I don't have a problem with the reverse board and batten. I have a big problem with the wide range of opening sizes. So I'm gonna have to say no.
Okay. Mike Hodder,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin. Peter,
yes.
thank you. Susan Replier.
Yes.
Yes.
So
That was a very deep yes. that first
You got
one.
a deep voice all of a sudden, Susan.
Susan, did we get you?
Yes.
Thank you. Brad Harriman,
Yes, yes.
okay, Kathy Barnett, I vote yes on the waivers. So with the waivers having been granted by a majority of yes votes, the application is now considered complete. If somebody would be willing to make a motion to that effect, that the
So moved.
application. Thank you. Motion has been made and about a second
Seconded.
and seconded. Okay, roll call vote. Von Dugan.
Nope.
Okay, Mike Cotter,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Replier,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. I vote yes on accepting the application is complete. So we'll open the public hearing now. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this application? Now would be the time to do that. Okay, I don't see any coming forward. So planning board members, do you have any other questions or comments?
My comment would be that I constantly am impressed with Vaughn's desire to keep things nice in town. And in some ways, I completely would agree with her about the windows, but many of the other things seem to be improvements. And I want to suggest that what she's trying to do is wonderful for the town.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, okay, Matt, you have some conditions for us to consider?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to recommend a total of 9 conditions, 6 and 3 additional conditions, referencing comments in my review. Condition 1 is incorporation of all of the plans submitted within the application package. That's plans 1 through 6, with the architecturals being incorporated as well as part of the package. Condition 2, the applicant shall be responsible for the payment of all recording fees associated with the notice of decision on the application. Condition 3, all the documentation submitted in the application is obviously incorporated as part of the approval. Condition 4, all plans that were certified by licensed professionals shall be certified with final stamps and signatures prior to the plans being signed by the board. Condition 5, a letter of compliance with the ADA shall be submitted by the applicant prior to a certificate of occupancy, both principally on the site access from, I presume, White Mountain Survey and Engineering. Condition 6, the applicant shall enter into construction observation agreement with the town's consultant engineer. And just to comment on this briefly, despite the limited components of site work, I would like an inspection of the town's consulting engineer, just that all the elements of the site have been built in accordance with the approved plans. Condition 7, I'd like to request that the board sign on to removing the sign as shown on the plan set. And the justification for this is that I do have concerns about the sign's location and site distance. And rather than burdening the application with a sign location, they can simply submit a sign permit that will need to comply with the sign ordinance. So I would prefer that the sign reference be removed from the application if the board is comfortable, and that includes the spatial location as well. Condition 8 is that all waivers granted by the board be added as a note to the plan set. And then condition 9, a note to be added to the plan. And Jim, you may need to correct me if the board is comfortable on this, but I don't believe there's a note referencing that snow will be removed from the site if it can't adequately be stored. Is that in there and I've missed it? And if so, I'll remove that condition.
Yeah, yes, Matt, that is there. It's on,
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. It's on sheet 2 of, I see it. It's on sheet 2. So I'll remove that condition number 9. So only conditions 1 through 8. Apologies for that.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Applicant, do you have any issues with those? You're all set?
well, I'm good. It's also, that note is also on sheet 3, Matt, the second phase.
Okay,
As well.
great. Thanks, Jim. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing.
Can I say one thing?
Sorry, Josh.
No, I just want
Go
to.
ahead.
I just want to say thank you, and this is a really exciting moment for the organization, and those who have been familiar with Gala from the beginning. It was over 12 years ago that we incorporated here in town, founded right here in town, and when we did, even though we didn't have even a home office at the time, we actually incorporated as Gala Community Center. Just hoping someday in the future we would have a physical space, and it's finally starting to look like that's happening. So it's we're just really honored to be part of this town, and excited about the next decade and more ahead. So thanks.
Okay.
I remember, Josh, if I may, I remember when Josh organized Gala in the living room of his mom's house. And I can say that you've certainly come a long way, Mr. Arnold, in that fairly short space of time, from sitting in the living room chair to looking towards a new Gala building in a downtown location. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm closing the public hearing and need to go through another roll call vote for this application. Von Dugan.
Do we have a
I think it's what's the motion?
Oh, didn't I do the motion?
No.
A long day. Okay. Yes. How about well, we got the conditions. So does somebody want to make a motion on this application?
Sure, I'll be happy to move to approve case number 2020-18, tax map 203-070, Gala Global Awareness Local Action Site Plan Review to be approved with conditions 1 through 8 as enumerated by the planner.
Thank you, Mike. Somebody want to second that up?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now I can do the roll call vote. Von Dugan,
I'm going to have to say no, but I'm deeply in favor of this project, just based on the fact that it's doesn't have proportions that resemble Wolfeboro.
okay, thank you. Mike Carter,
Yes,
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Replier,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. I vote in favor of the application, and really good luck to you folks, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, on to the next item. This is an action item, appointment of a planning board alternate. Back several meetings ago, we determined that we didn't have an alternate. We really need one in order to have the proper number of planning board members reviewing applications. So Mike contacted some folks, and I contacted some folks, and Mike talked to Julie Jacobs, who's a small business owner here in town. Also a member of the Distinguished Wayfinding Sign Committee. And so we're presenting Julie, and she's here. Julie, would you like to say a couple words to us or not? Whatever.
I don't have many words, but I'm thinking that this might be a fun thing for a year. We'll see how it goes. I've never done anything like this before, officially, so it ought to be interesting.
Okay, all right, very good. Anyone want to ask any questions or make any comments, or if not?
I think Julie will make a great contribution, and I look forward to her being an alternate on the planning board.
Yes. Right,
Thanks,
thank
Mom.
Good.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, to appoint Julie Jacobs as an alternate
Exactly.
for 1 year.
Exactly.
Seconded.
And the motion has been made and seconded. Okay, another roll call vote, folks. Von Dugan,
Yes.
Mike Hodder,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Replier,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. I vote in favor. And Julie, we're looking forward to having you join us.
Thanks for having me.
Probably, Matt, probably should get together with Julie and come to the next meeting. That would be great. But why don't we set up a time to chat with you before, okay? Okay, all right, well, thank you very
Does
much.
she have to be sworn in?
Yes,
She does. Yes, I sent Julie an email
Does she
today
have to be
about-
sworn in?
Yes.
yeah,
I
she
sent her
does.
an email today. She'll need to pick up some materials. We'll have a coordination meeting, and she will need to be sworn in. That's correct. Yes.
Congratulations, Julie.
Thank you.
Yes, right.
Congratulations.
Welcome.
The next item is the opportunity for public comment. Is there any member of the public that would like to give us any words of wisdom or make any comments? Okay, and don't see any lights going on here, so I'll go on to the next item. This is a under other information. This is a letter that I received on May 11th, 2020, and generally when I get correspondence, I share it as chairman. I share it with all of the board members, so you all have that in your packet. Let's see, Matt, did you have other information or items that you want to bring up?
On this specific matter, Kathy, or?
Well, you can on this specific matter, but if people don't have any questions, there's.
I would request from the board that if you have questions related to this letter, I would, out of courtesy, request that you contact me directly. The town and indirectly myself are involved in a BTLA case involving the subject property identified within this letter. So it is in that form, a form of active litigation. Therefore, I would just urge you to contact me directly if you do have questions about the statements made within the letter. Certainly, you have the ability to make comments if you'd like, but I'd like an opportunity to address any specific questions or concerns directly if you have them.
Okay, thank you. Matt, did you have any other items that you wanted to bring up? You all set?
I believe I'm all set unless I am missing something.
Okay. Well, I have an item. You're gonna love this one.
Okay, then I have an item that's going to take 2 hours that makes your.
Well, Citizens
Move to
Bank.
adjourn.
Where
Second that, Mike.
Thank you, Brad.
the Citizens Bank, when they were approved, we approved them with landscaping, and it's in a very visible location right next door to the recently renovated town hall, and they really, I don't think are doing the town any favors with, they have taken care of their landscaping, but when you walk by that location, it's really kind of sad that they haven't taken better care. I'm not sure that we can do anything because the landscaping that we approved is in, but I guess our hands are kind of tied when people don't pay attention to taking care of their properties. But that's a personal thing with me, so we can just move right on to the minutes.
Could we send a letter asking them to, step up in their maintenance because it's becoming an eyesore? Not because it wasn't approved that way.
Yeah, right. Is that something we can do, Matt?
Well, I almost got out of the meeting unscathed, but I'm not comfortable writing that letter myself, and I want to make sure I help the board understand why. I worry about writing letters like that if we're just going to direct it to one property owner when we have, and I think back to a very specific conversation that we had about properties on Laner Street that were of concern at this board. If we're not going to be equitable with our approach in writing letters about properties that are not well taken care of, I'm concerned about doing it for one. I know that sounds as almost to be a cop-out, but if the board would like to do that and you'd like me to ghostwrite it, I'm happy to do it. I'm comfortable sending one myself.
I don't think
Well,
it's.
why not send it to everyone who could use a little help and encouragement and encourage them to help clean up their property? Just so that, we're equitable.
The town has committed quite a few resources in order to improve its appearance, and especially, I guess this one is, I see it as you're coming right into town, and it just seems like it needs a little more attention.
I agree with you.
My,
Go ahead, Peter.
my issue would be who is going to be the arbiter of which particular level of issue is going to be cited or written to. And then it becomes a problem for that person. And then someone's going to say, oh, but they're a little bit worse, or I'm better, or whatever. And it becomes very hard to deal with that issue.
Yeah, okay.
Would you like me to just have a conversation with them?
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think it's back to the old word, improper and irregular for the planning board to intervene in the way a private property owner who is adhering to all other requirements and conditions is maintaining his property. If we don't like the way it looks, as a board, we have an opportunity during site plan review to make conditions that'll make it look the way we want it to. If we pass that opportunity up and it's over, that's our chance. We should not, as a board, and nor should the planner, approach a landowner and say, the board does not really like the way you're handling, or it doesn't like the way your property appears, and we would like you to make it look better. Because like Peter says, what standards do we apply? And the board doesn't really have the authority to do that, my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to the minutes. May 5th. Anybody have any issues with the May 5th minutes?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
Pages are not numbered, so it's page 5.
Yeah. Okay.
The very first sentence. The sentence goes on to read, regarding runoff into Crescent Lake from the salt shed. It's from the parking area. Change the word salt shed to parking area. Because Ty and Bonds PMP did not know about the existence of the salt shed. It was on an application subsequent to their analysis.
Okay. All right, and I had one. at the top of, I think it was page 10 and then page 12. Well, at the top of page 10, on the Harriman Hill application, it should be Lakes Region Community Developers. And then there's a reference to the organization on the following page, which is page 12 in the middle. Again, Lakes Region Community. We need to add community.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? Okay, somebody want to make a motion to accept the minutes as corrected?
So moved.
Thank you. Motion been made. How about a second?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, Von Dugan.
It's a practical book. It's wonderful. Yes.
Mike Cotter,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Ripley-Air,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard, yes. Okay, the next set of minutes. Any issues? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
So moved.
Motion has been made, and somebody want to second it?
Seconded.
Second, okay, thank you. Okay, roll call vote, Von Dugan,
I abstain. I was not there.
okay. Mike Cotter,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Susan Replier,
Yes.
Brad Harriman.
Yes.
And, okay, thank you. And Kathy Barnard, I vote yes. Okay. All right, any other issues that you folks want to discuss, or are we all set?
Also here.
Oh, okay, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn, and then I have to do another roll call vote.
Oh boy. So moved.
Okay,
Seconded.
motion's been made and seconded. Von Dugan, are you in favor?
Yes.
Okay, Mike Cotter,
Yes.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
okay, Susan Replier,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. I vote yes. Hope that sometime in the very near future, we can all gather in hall our meetings.
Kathy, can I quickly, I had noted to Kathy, I would bring this up. In the event that the board is, and I believe adjournment has happened, so I'm just talking to you generally here, but in the event that the board